Good evening everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 8th November 2025 and today we are going to discuss some important topics from the Hindu and Indian Express newspaper. Here is the list of important topics that we are going to discuss today, and the first topic with which we are going to start this session is about recent Supreme Court's order on stray dogs. And this article has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view this article is very important for General Studies paper 1. Now let's jump into the article. Let's discuss Supreme Court's order with respect to stray dogs. Now in fact, recently one of its order, the Supreme Court has directed all the authorities to remove stray dogs from the public spaces. Now here the public spaces including schools, hospitals, railway stations, bus stands. And Supreme Court has also ordered the authorities to not just remove these stray dogs but also relocate them to shelters after the sterilization. Now sterilization actually involves that it actually makes dogs important. They cannot go for breeding as well, so if sterilization takes place, right? So in fact, a bench of Justices Vikram Nath and Sandeep Mehta and NV Anjaria, so this particular bench of the Supreme Court has ordered that dogs should not be released back into the areas where they were taken from. This is what the Supreme Court has ordered. And in fact, the Supreme Court has also cited the recent attack on a foreign national in Bengaluru, because in recent times also there were incidents of the stray dogs attacks on people, particularly the old aged people and even children as well. So therefore the court has actually cited these recent attacks by stray dogs on people, and court has also noted that stray dog incidents, they threaten public safety in India. And apart from that, stray dogs very often discourage tourism, and tourism is very important for a country like India, and it may also tarnish India's global image as well. So Supreme Court has cited all these things for the relocation of the stray dogs, a removal of stray dogs from the public places, and then sterilization of the stray dogs as well. So I hope you have understood what Supreme Court has actually said about the stray dogs. Now let's understand the animal birth control rules of 2023 and what Supreme Court has quoted with respect to animal birth control rules of 2023. Now in fact, the central government has notified animal birth control rules 2023, and these are notified under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. So because the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960 was passed with the objective of prevention of cruelty to animals. So therefore animal birth control rules 2023 are notified under this particular legislative provision, and in fact it has replaced the earlier animal birth control or dog rules of 2001. Now in fact, these rules incorporate the directions of the Supreme Court with respect to stray dogs in Animal Welfare Board of India versus People for Elimination of Stray Troubles. Now in fact, in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court has clearly stated that relocation of dog is not permitted. Right, so let's understand what exactly is the role of local bodies in a removal of stray dogs from the local public places, and also relocating them to some other places, and sterilization of local dogs. Now in this context, the local bodies can actually play a very important role. So let's understand the role of local bodies as well. So in order to implement the animal birth control rules of 2023 program for the sterilization of stray dogs and immunization of stray dogs, because stray dogs also spread diseases like rabies, so therefore it is also very important to protect people from these diseases. So therefore the major responsibility is on the local bodies, particularly the municipal bodies, corporations and panchayats. So therefore these local bodies, they must ensure that a humane treatment, and in fact they should also avoid cruelty during this entire process, and this is what the Supreme Court has noted with respect to the removal of stray dogs from the public spaces. And in fact, the effective implementation of the orders given by the Supreme Court will help reduce the stray dog population in public spaces, and it will also address the animal welfare concerns as well. So therefore we can say that this is a balanced judgment on the part of the Supreme Court, because it has balanced the animal welfare concerns on the one hand, and at the same time it has also balanced the increasing stray dog population in Indian streets. They may harm the people as well. right? So now in this context we'll specifically understand what Supreme Court has said with respect to the stray dog removal and relocation, right? So this order from the Supreme Court is considered as a comprehensive order because it covers all important and all essential aspects with respect to removal and relocation of stray dogs. So let's understand removal of stray dogs from the public institutions. So this is what the Supreme Court has clearly mentioned in its order, that the stray dogs must be removed from the public institutions. Now in fact all stray dogs should be removed from the educational institutions, hospitals, railway stations and similar public premises. So this is what the Supreme Court has said with respect to removal of dogs, stray dogs from the public spaces. So once all these dogs are being removed from the public spaces, they must be relocated to designated shelters after a sterilization has to be conducted, and then vaccination should also be given so that these dogs will not spread diseases like rabies. And then those dogs should not be released in the same localities where they are earlier removed, right? So this is very clear from the Supreme Court. And then Supreme Court has also ordered a mandatory anti-rabies measures as well, because we just understood that dogs also spread rabies, and in fact rabies is a very dangerous disease for human beings. So therefore all government and private hospitals, so they're required to maintain adequate stocks of anti-rabies vaccines, because it is very important that when you are removing dogs from the public spaces and relocating them into some other places, or you're sterilizing them, you're vaccinating them, there might be chances of increasing dog bites, and that would further spread rabies diseases as well. So therefore Supreme Court has clearly directed that there should be adequate stocks of anti-rabies vaccines and immunoglobulin at all times to ensure immediate treatment for the dog bite victims as well. So this is the second directive that has been given by the Supreme Court to the authorities. And apart from that, awareness in educational institutions. So this is also very important with respect to the removal of stray dogs and ensuring the safety of the public, because the Ministry of Education should take up the responsibility to instruct schools and colleges to conduct regular awareness sessions. So these awareness sessions aimed at students and staff on safe behavior around animals, and first aid for bites, and immediate reporting of the procedures. So on all these things, the Ministry of Education should provide awareness campaigns. So it should conduct awareness campaigns, so all those things. And apart from that particular aspect, so there will be a nodal officers, and nodal officers will also be appointed. And in fact each institution which has been covered under the order, so it must designate a nodal officer, and this nodal officer's duty is to ensure cleanliness and in fact prevent stray dog entry into the institutions, and even maintaining hygiene within its premises. So Supreme Court is very clear with respect to this, that there will be a nodal officers and those nodal officers will be appointed. And apart from that, securing institutional premises, and this is also a very important aspect, because the administrative heads of various institutions, the public institutions and private institutions, they must ensure adequate fencing, boundary walls, gates to prevent the entry of stray dogs into the hospitals and the government buildings, and other animals should not be allowed inside the premises of these buildings. And Supreme Court has also made it clear that there is a need for the removal of cattle from the highways as well, because very often the cattle on the highways, they also cause accidents. They are also the major cause of accidents. So therefore authorities have been ordered to clear all stray cattle and animals from state and national highways. And apart from that, they should also clear the cattle and stray animals from the expressways and relocate them into the designated shelters as well. And in fact a dedicated highway patrol and helplines should also be started, right? So in this context, government must form a dedicated patrol teams or use existing road safety units for a continuous monitoring of the stray dogs or a stray cattle or even the wild animals on the roads, because they very often cause the major accidents on the roads. So these are the orders that the Supreme Court has given with respect to stray dogs. The objective of this order from the Supreme Court to make public spaces safe for the people, right? So I hope you have understood this topic. And next, a very important topic, US and China, and they're coming together to form a G2 grouping that has been recently announced by US President Donald Trump, and this has been given in the Indian Express newspaper. From the syllabus point of view, this is very important for gender studies paper to India and international relations. So you can also go through the syllabus as well. And if we go into the topic, so recently US President Donald Trump so made a reference to a G20 grouping. So as of now we have a G7 grouping. So this G7 grouping consisting of all developed industrialized countries, and in a similar way we also have a G20 grouping as well. Now this G2 grouping, this G2 grouping consisting of both US and China, right? So in fact these two countries are trying to create a bipolar world, and in fact they are competing with each other to establish a hegemonic world order. But US and China coming together to form a G2 grouping, it is surprising, right? So in fact it may lead to US-China duopoly, raising concerns among the allies. For example, countries like India, South Korea, Japan and Asian countries, there are concerns if US and China have come together and they have formed a grouping called a G2. Now in fact there are fears within G7 also, because there are several other countries who have some issues with countries like China. So therefore it has to be seen, and but this is what Donald Trump has announced with respect to G2 grouping, a grouping of China and US, but this has not formally taken place so far. So let's understand the introduction of this topic. So firstly, US President Donald Trump, so he is always unpredictable, right? So US under the leadership of Donald Trump also an unpredictable country, so it has become in recent times. But Donald Trump has recently announced that before meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping, that the G2 will be convening shortly, and this G2 will be consisting of both China and US. So therefore this announcement made by US President Donald Trump, it has reignited the debates about the future of US-China relations and even possible sidelining of the key allies of US. So there are several other countries, those countries have issues with China, but if US is sided with China, then it may antagonize the allies of US, right? So it may sideline the allies of US, right? So that is the key concern here if G2 is being established. Now the reference to the G2, a concept implying US-China duopoly in global leadership, so it signals a shift in tone that could unsettle Washington's partners in Asia and beyond as well. For example, imagine a country like Japan, which already have issues with China. Imagine Asian countries with respect to South China Sea also, they have issues with China. But if US and China have been coming together and they have been forming a grouping like G2, so what about the concerns of these countries with respect to China? And that has to be seen, right? So in fact, at a time when geopolitical fault lines are already deep, right? So at present point of time throughout the world, the geopolitical fault lines are deeper in nature, but this actually framing challenges the balance built through multilateral institutions and strategic groupings like Quad, because US has already invested a lot in the multilateral groupings like Quad, and the multilateral groupings like Quad aimed at countering Chinese influence and hegemony in the South China Sea region and Indo-Pacific region, right? However, if China and US have come together, what about the groupings like Quad? And what about the other multilateral institutions which are primarily created against the assertiveness and aggressive stance of China? But now let's understand the origin of the G2 as a concept. Now in fact, the concept of G2 was first introduced in the year 2005 by an economist called Fred Bergsten. So economist Fred Bergsten, he first coined the term G2 of a country, US and China, right? So in fact, he also proposed that US must prioritize the bilateral relationships with key global actors. Now in fact, the European Union, China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, so that it will help US to stabilize the global economic systems and even the energy flows as well. And this is what he made the suggestion. So instead of working on multilateral ties, So he suggested that US should work on bilateral ties. US should try to strengthen the bilateral relations with different countries, and that will aid and help US and even the global economy as well. However, we all knew that the world has faced 2008 financial crisis, and US was the country which was worst hit by the 2008 global financial crisis. But during the 2008 financial crisis, the G2 idea has gained momentum on a large scale, because Bergstrom has argued that effective global economic recovery and climate action would be impossible without US-China cooperation. So he has been emphasizing that there is a strong need for US and China cooperation. These two countries should come together, and these two countries should work on emerging areas like climate action and even economic recovery in the backdrop of 2008 global economic crisis. So therefore, we could say that the demand for G2 has further strengthened immediately after the global financial crisis. Now, in fact, the concept was not intended to replace G20, because already a group of 20 industrialized nations or developed countries, it is already existing, and G7 is also existing, and the concept is not to replace the multilateral institutions like International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, but the objective of G2 is to supplement and strengthen the global governance through a pre-coordination between US and China. Because US and China, we all knew that these two are the first and second biggest economies in the world. So he expected that the best cooperation or pre-coordination from US-China would help the global economy as well. However, there are several other prominent thinkers as well, and they have also come up with the idea like G2 grouping, so active cooperation between US and China. And apart from that, even Obama administration also, when Barack Obama was a president of US, so the Barack Obama's administration also explored its feasibility during the early years of US-China engagement under Hu Jintao as a China's premier. Right, so this is how the G2 concept has emerged over a period of time. But let's understand the changing nature of China's global posture over a period of time, because in recent times China has becoming more and more assertive and aggressive as well. So let's understand the global posture, whether G2 is really possible at this point of time. So let's understand this. Now, in fact, so few things that we should understand. If you look at the global order, so the global order has shifted dramatically, and it has shifted drastically as well, because last 2 decades China has grown at a tremendous pace. Now, China is no longer a contentious power that once adhered to Deng Xiaoping's direction or dictum to hide your strength and bide your time. So you just hide your strength, whatever strength you have, and then you just wait for the time. This is what Deng Xiaoping's dictum, right? So you further strengthen your existing capacities, but you should hide your strength, and you should just wait for the time. And this is what he said, right? So China is now a superpower. It has been emerging as a superpower. It has been transforming from a developing country to a developed country. Now, under President Xi Jinping, Beijing has asserted itself across multiple domains. So there are multiple domains that Beijing has asserted itself, and from the South China Sea, because China has been claiming the majority portion of the South China Sea, and China also have the border disputes with a number of countries including India as well. And in fact, the aggressive and assertive stance of China with respect to Taiwan Strait and Taiwan, and even the global technology infrastructure. So all these factors have been indicating that China has been emerging as a superpower, and China even threatening US hegemony in different parts of the world as well. So therefore, this kind of a development and transformation that has been shown by China, so that has redefined its interactions with the United States and its allies as well. So we all knew that China has started the Belt and Road Initiative, and China has been heavily investing in infrastructure that could facilitate its investment, that could facilitate its growth and development, right? So therefore, China overall, through Belt and Road Initiative, it has expanded its economic footprint in different parts of the world. And in fact, almost all of India's neighbors except Bhutan and India are part of the Belt and Road Initiative. but India and Bhutan are not part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So this is the aim of China to increase its economic footprint all over the world. However, its military modernization has challenged the American dominance in the Indo-Pacific region as well, because as of now, China thinks that Indo-Pacific should be dominated and controlled by China itself. But on the other hand, this idea of China has been receiving a strong pushback from US as well, because US also have stakes in the Indo-Pacific region, and that's why US has established a grouping like Quad. However, Trump administration in his first term from 2017 to 2021, so it was a pivotal in reframing China from a strategic partner to a strategic competitor, right? Because he just modified China from a strategic partner to strategic competitor, because he understood that China may threaten the hegemony of US in other parts of the world as well, right? So in fact, US President Donald Trump in the year 2017, he also announced a national security strategy. And this national security strategy of Donald Trump explicitly identified China's actions as threats to the rules-based international order. Because with respect to South China Sea also, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, now this Permanent Court of Arbitration has also given an order, and China refused to follow that order. So therefore, China's disregard for the international law or international order, and leading trade wars between US and China, tariff barriers as well, and renewed security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific through initiatives like Quad. So all these things have been highlighted by the national security strategy as well. But let's understand Trump's G2 framing and a return to bilateralism, because in fact the person who actually coined this G2 term, he actually advocated for bilateralism, because that would help and assist US and the global economy as well. So how US has been looking for bilateralism instead of multilateralism, because the Trump's recent comments on G2, so it actually marks a sharp contrast to his earlier confrontational stance, because Trump has already identified China as a strategic competitor, but now Trump is interested to form a grouping like G2. So this is a sharp and a strong contrast to his earlier confrontational stance. However, 2017 to 2021, so this particular phase when US President was Donald Trump for the first time, it was characterized by decoupling and trade hostilities between China and US. However, this particular G2 grouping, so it suggests a recognition of China's great power status and potential equal footing in global decision making as well, right? So when Trump coming up with this idea of G2, so this actually means Trump recognizing China as a great power, and at the same time he has been providing equal status to China and a potential equal footing in the global decision making as well. So that essentially means US has itself identified and recognized China as a competitor, as a great power. And in fact, there are several other countries who are traditional allies and partners of US, right? So in fact, this framing raises several concerns of strategic ambiguity as well. For example, countries like Japan, Asian countries, European Union. So there are several other countries. However, it could signal a transactional pivot, because Trump becomes purely transactional in nature in recent times, because Trump would negotiate directly with Beijing on key issues. So key issues including trade, technology, security. So therefore, it would lead to further marginalizing the traditional allies as well. Now, in fact, Trump prioritizing this bilateralism over multilateralism. Now, in fact, it actually contradicts the earlier existing multilateral Indo-Pacific vision. And this multilateral Indo-Pacific vision led to the establishment of Quad between US, India, Australia, and Japan. And in fact, other alliances are also aimed at countering Chinese dominance, Chinese hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region. But all these initiatives are now in question if US goes with such a grouping called G2. Now, from the India's point of view, let's understand what are the implications of this G2 grouping if it is formed. Now, India, in fact, has been facing a complex diplomatic recalibration, right? Because the imposition of 50% tariffs on Indian goods by US President Donald Trump, so it has further strained the relations between India and US. And that further leads to the postponement of the planned Quad Leaders Summit as well. So Trump is not backing off from this 50% tariffs, and the 50% tariffs also badly hit India's economy and India's exports to US as well. Right? So the 50% tariffs imposed by Trump on Indian exports to US has led to strained relations between these two countries. And in fact, the diplomatic discussions between India and US, so they even hinted at a potential Quad restructuring. So Quad might be restructured where Philippines could temporarily replace India. And this move that reflects both India's independent stance on global issues and Washington's evolving calculus as well. Now, one thing that we should understand why Philippines would replace India temporarily is because India is not ready to form military alliances. India is not ready to turn Quad against Russia or China. So this is against US interests. So that's why US might replace India temporarily with Philippines as well. So this has been indicating that India's independence stance in foreign policy or strategic autonomy, we call it as. Now, in fact, given India's growing economic and strategic weight at this point of time, so many observers have been arguing that any sustainable Indo-Pacific architecture cannot exclude India at this point of time, because any Indo-Pacific policy without India is meaningless. So everybody knows about that, because India is one such country which could potentially challenge China's hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region. So however, if we look into the implications of this G2 framing at the global order, on the global order, US and China move towards a G2 model, right? So it means a smaller states could face a strategic marginalization if this G2 grouping has been formed by US and China. And in fact, the rules-based order, so this rules-based order at the international level, it relies on consensus building through the global institutions, multilateral institutions, and it may weaken as decision making becomes concentrated between the two superpowers, where US itself has recognized China as a superpower by providing a thought of forming a grouping like G2. I hope you have understood this topic, and the next important topic is about rhesus macaque. Now, in fact, a panel seeks higher protection for rhesus macaque under Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, it is very important for General Studies paper 3, and you can also go through the syllabus as well. Now let's talk about rhesus macaque. What is this rhesus macaque? This is how rhesus macaque looks like. Now, in fact, recently a standing committee of the National Board for Wildlife, which is a statutory body that has been established under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, it has recommended reinstating rhesus macaque species of monkeys under the Schedule 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act, so that the greatest protection can be extended to the rhesus macaque. Right? So if you look at the major features of the rhesus macaque, so this is highly adaptable because they thrive in natural habitats and even the urban landscapes as well. So you very often see rhesus macaque in your home places also. Now, in fact, the population densities of rhesus macaque, they can reach extremely high numbers in cities like Delhi as well. In urban areas, rural areas, and even in forest areas also, you very often find this rhesus macaque, and this National Board for Wildlife has been recommending that this rhesus macaque should be included in Schedule 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act to extend greater protection. And in fact, the rhesus macaque is also excellent swimmers, and they can cross rivers with ease. Now, in fact, the female can give birth every year and it would help boost the population of rhesus macaque. And in fact, they also exhibit sexual dimorphism. That means males are visibly larger and more aggressive compared to the females. And in fact, the younger females are outranking elders. So that means the social status isn't always tied to the age of the monkeys. Now, in fact, they also carry some diseases. Some rhesus monkey carry herpes B virus, which is dangerous to human beings as well. So I hope you have understood some basic features of rhesus macaque. Now, in fact, the rhesus macaque should be placed under the Schedule 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act. In terms of IUCN status, it is least concern status, right? So in fact, it is also known as Macaca mulerta. So this is a species of old world monkey, and in fact, in terms of appearance, they are familiar brown primates with red faces and rears. Apart from that, they have a close cropped hair on their heads, which accentuates their very expressive faces as well. So if we talk about the distribution, they distributed all across the South Asia and Southeast Asia, and even countries like China and some other neighboring countries as well. And if we talk about the habitat, they have a diverse habitat including forests, mangroves, scrub, grasslands, mountain regions. So therefore, they live in a diverse habitats, and they can also adapt to the diverse habitats as well. And in fact, they can also adapt well to the human presence and form larger troops in the human dominated landscapes than in the forests as well. Now, if we talk about the diet of this rhesus macaque, they are omnivorous animals, right? So they are considered as omnivorous animals, eating seeds, roots, bark, fruits, and cereals, right? So these are the important details with respect to the rhesus macaque. So I hope you have understood all these topics, and thank you so much. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and also like the video, and thank you so much.